Hello, everyone. Welcome to the second episode of Beyond the Pit. Today we have Chris from Killing Time and Kings Destroy. And I wanted to start off by asking you how you first got into music.
Um, well, when I was a kid, I have a brother who's 10 years older than I am, and he was a musician. He played drums and guitar. And so growing up in the house, he had a pretty killer record collection. We also had a drum kit and amps and guitars. So basically, I got, into music through my older brother.
Oh, that's sick. Speaking on that, actually, what were probably your top three favorite childhood bands?
Oh, that's a good question. It depends on what part of my childhood. When I was very young in the 70s, because an old man. So, when I was really young, it was probably Kiss. Um, when I was in my young teens, it was definitely Iron Maiden.
Oh, hell yeah.
And yeah, I'm still, Iron Maiden might be my favorite band of all time. Still, I think those first five Iron Maiden records, I don't think there's another band who had a better run than those first five records.
Actually, so
Yeah,
in my record holder right behind me, the actual first record in here, it's like a mix. I have a live record and then I have this one. So that's sick. And also Kiss was actually the first band I saw live.
oh,
Uh
when was that?
I can't remember. I'd have to check, but I saw them at TD Garden first, I think.
There's
Uh
nothing wrong with that.
yeah. But also speaking on that, what's probably your favorite concert that you've been to?
Oh, that's a good question.
Hmm.
The first concert I ever went to was actually Iron Maiden, and but they weren't even headlining. They were opening up for Judas Priest,
Oh, that's sick.
so that was pretty cool. But God, I've seen so many. I saw Metallica with Cliff Burton um, when they weren't headliners then either. They were opening for Ozzy. This was right after Master of Puppets came out.
Oh yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
like 86 or something. I was like 16.
Hmm.
So, and they were killer, man. So, I saw AC/DC in the 80s. I mean, I saw a lot of great punk shows. I'd probably go with seeing Metallica with Cliff Burton.
Yeah,
Um,
that sounds awesome. I would have loved to see them with Cliff Burton.
yeah, they were pretty special back then, man. They were pretty punk rock. This was,
Yeah,
they were just kind of getting ahead of steam among people who were into thrash and punk, like kind of more underground. But it was definitely way before they became, they blew up into like the biggest band in the world. So
yeah,
it was really, it was pretty special to see them at that point.
yeah. I heard you like the Knicks. How do you feel about their current performance this season?
I have the game on right now because we were originally supposed to
Yeah.
meet at noon, and the game's on. I'm not going to pay attention to it. Yeah, I have my Knicks hat on too.
Oh,
So
that's sick. Yeah.
yeah, I've been a hardcore Knicks fan for a very long time. I'm obviously, you know, I, I'm excited about how well they've been doing the last few years, especially because they've sucked really bad for a long time.
Yeah.
Um, I'm a little concerned right now with their ability to compete against the Cavs and the Celtics, whom they're playing at this very moment. But
Yeah.
I'm hopeful. Get Mitchell Robinson back, and we'll see how it all shakes out in the playoffs.
Hey, I'm from
But
Boston, but I'm not a big
eh,
fan of basketball. I mean,
okay,
I like watching it, but I'm not really rooting for a team. So,
all right. Well, we'll let it slide. We'll let it
yeah.
slide. I actually have a lot of really good friends from Boston that I've made over the years of just being in the hardcore scene,
Yeah.
and but yeah, when it comes to sports, I can't abide any Boston fans,
Yeah.
unfortunately.
Yeah, because two biggest hardcore scenes, Boston and New York.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely when I got into hardcore, they were the two biggest scenes. I
Yeah.
mean, when I first started playing, the first hardcore band I played with was Uppercut, and the first show I ever played was in Boston at this place
Yeah.
called the Rat. That's not around anymore, but it was kind of a legendary
Yeah.
place. And I believe that show is on YouTube. Actually, I think I was 19, so it was 1989. Um, the scene was sick, and yeah, there's still have a lot of friends up there from Boston that we made back in the 80s. So it's, hardcore really is
Yeah.
a scene more than anything else. And but yeah, a lot of sick shows in Boston for sure.
Okay, how did you get into joining Killing Time, and what was it like joining a band with such a strong legacy in the New York hardcore scene?
Well, I met those guys when I joined, right around the time I joined Uppercut. Maybe I met them probably a little bit
Yeah.
earlier, in like 1988, right around the time that just before Brightside came out.
Yeah.
I met those guys, and the guys in Uppercut and Killing Time were all close friends. A
Yeah.
couple of the guys in Uppercut went to college with Carl, and at Fordham, and they were singer from Uppercut and Carl were living together in an apartment in the Bronx, and that's kind of where both bands hung out, and people would fill in for each other in those two bands. So, I'd been friends with them since you know 88 or so, and then both those bands broke up for the first time in, like, I guess around 1990. Carl and I and some of the other guys from Uppercut played in a band together, and I've played in bands with Carl, for a long time. So we were friends for a long time before I joined Killing Time. And, Killing Time had a few bass players over the years, but I'm definitely the longest running bass player in Killing Time because I guess it's going to be 20 years next year.
Yeah.
So, but to kind of answer your question, I was stoked because even though they were friends of mine, they were one of my favorite New York bands for sure. I just thought they had the best songs, still do. I mean, everybody thinks Brightside is a classic because it is. There's not a bad song on it, and the Raw Deal demo is classic for the same reason. So yeah, I was stoked. I'm still stoked to be in Killing Time. It's a
Yeah.
great band.
Yeah, they're awesome. When I forgot where I saw you guys last. But when I did, it was awesome. And
I think you're from Boston, so it was when
yeah.
we both played with Bane.
Yeah, at Roadrunner, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah,
We
that
played.
show was awesome.
Yeah, we played two shows with them both nights.
Hmm.
That was insane.
Yeah. Um, I actually just last went to Roadrunner for a show. It was more post-hardcore and stuff like that. But for some reason there was like a black metal band on there with like a bunch of post-hardcore bands. So it was really mixed. It was funny.
Yeah, it's I kind of like shows like that, to be
Yeah.
completely honest. And like I feel like in the 80s in the hardcore scene in New York, there maybe that wasn't as eclectic as something like that, but I think there's more of a I don't think all the bands necessarily sounded the same, even if they were included in the
Yeah.
under the label of New York hardcore. So I think it's interesting when you see a bill and it's not four cookie cutter kind of bands. I think that started happening more in the 90s. But yeah, that's cool. I'm down
Yeah.
with black metal.
Actually, speaking on that, what's probably have you listened to like any newer hardcore bands like say Painted Truth and stuff?
I don't I don't listen to a ton of new hardcore. I think, and I'm not proud of that fact. I think part of it is just like I'm an old guy, and if I do listen to hardcore, I tend to go back and listen to the stuff that I liked when I was just getting into hardcore. So I mean, the first Suicidal Tendencies record is my
Yeah.
all-time favorite. Maybe that or Suffer by Bad Religion. Maybe it's a tie. But there's some newer hardcore bands. There's a band from New York called Combust. They're not super new.
Oh, I know them. Yeah.
Yeah, they're great, man.
Yeah.
They're great. And yeah, so I don't listen to a ton of new hardcore. I probably should. Um, I see an awful lot of it when we play. If you play a show and we're headlining and there's six bands before
Yeah.
us, so I do see a lot of it live from all the shows we play, but I don't listen to too much of it, unfortunately.
Yeah. A band I love that's like new around here. They're so good live is Haywire. They just played with a band called Balmora. Balmora is more like I don't know how to explain it. They're like metalcore, but they're like melodic almost. They have like death metal elements in them.
Yeah, nowadays, I mean, I think your generation is just much
Yeah,
more used to like bands in the heavy scenes, just kind of mashing things together,
definitely.
and so you get hardcore bands that are hard to just call them hardcore. I mean, I think of the giant success of a band like Turnstile,
Yeah,
and which maybe you could say kind of started off as a straight
hardcore.
hardcore band,
Yeah,
but pretty quickly became something else. But I don't really have a problem with people saying they're a hardcore band. I think they are. You
yeah,
know, it's just a different world than when I was young getting into hardcore. But times always change. They it was different before I was into, you know, the scene was different before I got into it. So I'm not one of those old cranky guys who's upset that things have
yeah.
changed, but they have, you know.
Yeah, actually, speaking on Turnstile, I'd say like first few albums were hardcore. They kind of strayed out of it, but I think it's really cool how they're like really mainstream now because they started out as a hardcore band. Like a lot of these hardcore bands are going mainstream. I'm not a big fan of Knocked Loose, but they were playing on Jimmy
Yeah.
Kimmel, and that's
Yeah.
like awesome how hardcore
Yeah.
is getting like,
Yeah,
yeah,
that's another great example. Yeah, I mean, honestly, if when I was 18 or 19 or and you first started playing in hardcore bands, if you told any of us that we would still be doing it when we were in our 50s, we would have laughed at you because we
yeah,
would say, how could that possibly be? You know, and I've gotten to go all around the world, some crazy places, you know, Japan, South Korea, a bunch of times to Europe. So I think it's great. I don't begrudge those bands their success at all. You know, I think it helps when bands like that get really big, like they're on Jimmy
yeah,
Kimmel. It helps the scene, you know, because it lifts up all the bands that are maybe never going to get that big, but are underneath them.
exactly.
Um, so yeah, I mean, we played a lot of shows, just giant show. You know, I mean, think about those Bane shows, like you saw
Yeah.
that Bane show at Roadrunner. That place is gigantic, you know, and like um, Bane sold it out two nights in a row. I mean, I know their hometown band and everything, but it's just amazing to think that hardcore is as big as it is now.
I saw Have Heart there, and that show was packed. People were
Yeah,
there were like say 15 people crowd surfing every second. It was
yeah,
awesome. And it was there. I have a friend, he runs a record label called Discipline Records. I think that's where I may be wrong, but I think that's where I first met him in real life. And now he's like my best friend. And we actually just had band practice yesterday.
that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
What does your band sound like?
Well, so right now we're kind of mixing a bunch of stuff, like say a bit of melodic like metal, like melodic death, and then a bit of hardcore in that. And we're just playing around, kind of seeing how our sound sounds like, because we just added a new member. Before we
Yeah,
are just a hardcore band, but now we're trying to mix a bunch of stuff.
yeah, man, that's rad.
Yeah. Actually, speaking on that, is there any genre you'd like to explore more?
Uh, you you mentioned when during your introduction that I played in Kings Destroy. That's a
Yeah,
band that Carl from Killing Time and I both play guitar in. You know, and that's like a metal band.
yeah.
I guess a doom kind of stoner metal. So have the metal covered. Um, you know, I really I really love kind of 80s new wave and power pop.
Oh, I love
Um,
new wave.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know, I have since I was a kid, and you know, I played in a power pop band in the early 2000s for a little while, where I sang and played guitar, and that was a lot of fun. I wouldn't mind doing something like that again. Something that sounds like, you know, the Cars or or early Joe Jackson. Um, Aside from that, um, I think I pretty much covered it. You know, I'm not a super big fan of electronic music, though I've played around with making some stuff. I think it would be interesting to do something that was more electronic. but I'm not sure what exactly I would be trying to do. I
Yeah.
just think the idea of it is interesting.
Yeah, actually I did that once with the electronic stuff and it kind of just went nowhere. I mean, I made a few songs, but then I didn't
Yeah.
really know what to do because
I
of like,
yeah, I think the problem is like when you I feel like you can actually you tend to be more creative when you have some box that you have to work in.
yeah, definitely.
Like when you're I think people think like, oh, when you have like wide open creativity, that must be the greatest thing. But I feel like you don't really have any without any structure. I think you just can you do anything. You just sometimes you just make almost nothing, you know, and then it gets a little bit boring. Whereas if you say, oh, I'm going to start with the idea that at least I know I'm going to be playing in some kind of rock band, we're going to be playing live instruments. Um, we have to do something within the framework of two guitars, a bass, and drums. You can do lots of different things with that, but at least you have some kind of um, you, you have some kind of walls holding you in a little bit, and you have to work within those walls. It actually makes you a little bit more creative, I think.
Yeah.
For other people, maybe that's not the case.
Yeah. I definitely find it better to have like almost like a not really template, but like a goal.
Yeah,
And it's kind of bad to define yourself to a genre, but I also feel like if you try to have an idea of like say influences, try to think of like a few bands.
sure.
So then you kind of have like a goal of where you're
Ab-
trying to put your music.
Absolutely. I mean, like playing in King's Destroy. You know, the first record that we did was definitely very much rooted in like kind of a traditional doom metal thing,
Yeah.
like a Black Sabbath thing. Um, but then every record that we put out after that, the next three were each one was different than the last,
Yeah.
but they all there was a common thread that we were still two guitars, bass, drums, vocals, heavy guitars.
Mhm.
But there's a lot you can do with that to you know so that it doesn't become stale or that you don't say like, well, we're only a doom metal band and we can only do stuff that sounds like you know rehashed Black Sabbath. I think part of the problem with that scene, I think it had a really cool moment for a little while, and I feel like it got a little bit stale because I just feel like there were a lot of bands that were basically doing the exact same thing,
Yeah.
and there not a lot of bands willing to take a chance on trying to do something different. And you know, I was proud of the fact that we kept trying to do something a little bit different within that broad um, genre of music.
Definitely. Actually, do you like Candlemass?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're a great band. I just started getting into them again.
there's a lot of great stuff
Yeah.
in that and older stuff in that genre too. I mean, obviously there've been a lot of newer bands in the last 10 or 15 years, but um, yeah, Candlemass is great. The old Pentagram stuff is
Oh,
amazing.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, we got to tour with them a couple times in King's Destroy. It was pretty crazy. But yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff from the 70s out there that I think most people have never heard of. So it's, you know, the great thing about being into music now at your age is like there's so much, you know, you could discover a new band every day or two or three new bands every day for the rest of your life and you would never really even scratch the surface of punk and metal, because there's just
Exactly.
been so much that's happened since like 1970 up until now.
Think about how it's gonna be in 20 years time too. Like,
Yeah, it's crazy.
yeah. And I see like the scene around people in my school, more people are like recognizing my shirts compared to like last year or like say the year before. And it's kind of weird because I'm like, how do you know this band? And then I
Yeah.
realize they're way huger now, and it's like, whoa,
Well, I could tell you when I was a kid, it was a very lonely time to be into
yeah.
punk rock or, you know, metal. It was, you know, if you happen to ever see someone, never mind school, if you happen to ever see someone anywhere on the subway, on the bus,
Yeah.
um, and they had a, you know, even if they were in like Doc Martens or Vans, like, you know, the only people that wore those shoes back then were kids who were into, you know, punk rock and you know the famous story of how Rich McLaughlin met and Carl and Rich met and before they formed Breakdown was they were at a public pool in Yonkers and Rich had a mohawk. They were like, oh my
Yeah.
god, there's a kid with a mohawk. Like it's instant, right? It's
Yeah.
like and you didn't see a lot of kids in Yonkers with mohawks back then. I can tell you there were a lot of Guidos, but
That's how I still am today with a lot of kids. But actually, what made you guys decide not to replace Rich in Killing Time?
yeah, when Rich passed away, it was a huge shock to us, and obviously it
Yeah.
was a huge blow. And it was really at the height of the pandemic, so it was really odd because there's no funeral or wake, and I don't think I really realized how important those kind of rituals are
Yeah.
until somebody that you're really close with dies and you don't have them. It almost didn't feel like it was real. We were all separated and not seeing each other anyway for such a long time, and then you know then when that happened, it just it was very difficult. And then when we finally, when I think it was, I think it was this, yeah, it was This Is Hardcore asked us to come
Yeah.
in
Joe?
Philly. Yeah, Joe. And Joe's been great to us. I think we've probably played This Is Hardcore more than any band. And normally he wouldn't have bands play 2 years in a row, but there were a number of times. I think there was a point where we might have played 3 years in a row. But anyway, he asked us to come play. It was going to be the first time that we played since before the pandemic. And I don't know. I think we talked a little bit about the idea of maybe getting someone in to replace him, but we've all known each other for so long and have been friends for a long time. And I mean, you play in a band, like
Yeah.
being in a band is difficult. It's definitely like a family in a way that you have like unconditional love, but 4 or 5 different personalities that you have to learn to navigate and deal with. And if you find a balance and you're able to do it, it's not always easy to bring someone new into that. If you're a band that's been around for a long time and people that have known each other for a long time. So I think it was a combination of that and also maybe just to kind of honor Rich by like saying, well, no one's going to really be able to replace him.
Yeah.
So we played that show. We played the This Is Hardcore, one guitar, and it sounded great. And Killing Time, was a one guitar band on and off. When Brightside came out, it was a one guitar band. Through like Happy Hour, it was a one guitar band. It didn't really shift into being. It was a 2 guitar band at the very beginning when the Raw Deal demo, but again, Brightside, it was a one guitar band.
Hmm.
When Rich moved from bass to second guitar in the 90s is really when it became, then it was, he was playing guitar and it was a 2 guitar band, but he was, originally the bass player. So yeah, it was all those reasons, and I think maybe the biggest one is just to honor him by saying like
Yeah.
he couldn't really be replaced.
I don't see a lot of bands do that. That's actually a really good way of like thinking about it.
Yeah. It's still very weird that to
Yeah.
think about him being gone, when we're playing on stage, he was always on my side of the stage, on the bass side. So it's a little bit strange because just got so used to him
Yeah.
being over there. And but
Yeah, it sucks when a lot of these hardcore guys pass away because a lot of them were like really, friendly in the scene and a lot of people loved them. And then when they pass away, it's a really hard shock.
yeah, and Rich, that was really Rich in our band. Rich
Yeah.
was without a doubt the most kind of gregarious person in our band. Would talk to anybody. Um, you know, just genuinely liked people,
Yeah.
liked talking to fans, other bands, and everybody, when he passed, there was a huge outpouring of love for him, which was well deserved, because he really was the kid, the connection to all of Killing Time's fans.
Yeah. If there's one spot you could go to in New York to relax, where would you probably go?
Oh, one spot in New York to relax. I'm going to say Madison Square Garden for a Knicks game. I was
Yeah.
there. I was there a couple weeks ago. I actually get to see. I don't know, 4 or 5 games a year.
Oh,
Um,
that's awesome.
yeah, I mean, you might think it's not a super relaxing atmosphere, but
Yeah, definitely.
it is for me.
Yeah. If it was me and I was really into baseball, I'd probably be stressed out because like say the other team's kind of winning, then I'd be like,
Yeah, it can be stressful. I've been there. I'm trying to think. I don't think I've been there for a big loss in a long time, which is great.
yeah,
But it's great when they win. I mean, I was at some playoff games last year and the year before, and they won both of the ones I went to, and so that's when it's really serious when you're at a playoff game. Yeah, it can be heartbreaking. It's still a place I would want to be, um, win or loss.
yeah. Um my uncle's really into basketball, so I seem like if I'm over and there's a game, he'll be like yelling in the other room. And it's
Yeah, that's
yeah,
that's normally I have to like when I play, I have to my wife is not really a basketball fan, so
yeah,
normally when the Knicks are on, I'm locked in a separate room, so
yeah.
I need to be able to yell at the I need to be able to yell at the TV.
Speaking on basketball, who's actually probably your all-time favorite player?
Oh, my all-time favorite player is probably John Starks, who was a guard who played for the Knicks in the early '90s when they last got to the NBA Finals in
Uh,
'94. There's a very famous poster that was made of a dunk that he had on Michael Jordan, who was on obviously on the Bulls at the time.
yep.
And yeah, he was my favorite. He was just like a really hardworking kind of blue collar guy. He wasn't initially drafted. He was in the CBA, which was at the time like the minor league for the NBA, and the Knicks fans really loved him because of that and because of how hard he played. Just tough player. So I still have a John Starks jersey that I bought
Yeah,
back then.
that's awesome. How old would that be probably since you bought it?
Oh, I bought it probably in '93, so
Ah,
it's old.
yeah.
It's really old.
I have one last question. If
Sure.
you could go back and give your younger self like any advice
Oh man.
with starting out in music, what would you probably say?
Oh, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
Advice. I I think I would probably tell myself to learn more about music theory earlier than I did. It,
Yeah.
it took me, I was playing guitar for quite a long time before I knew anything about music theory. And I don't think it was that I thought it was bad or that I didn't need to, but I guess I did think that I didn't need to. And I don't necessarily think you need to, but once I did, it helped my playing a lot. It helped my songwriting more than
Yeah.
anything. Um, and I just think, especially in punk rock, the great thing about punk rock is like you don't need to study any music theory. You just need to get a guitar and learn like
Yeah.
3 chords, and like that's why it's awesome. But um, yeah, I think it would be to take the music part of it more seriously and less of just like, well, I'm in a punk rock band, and so it's not really about music. It's about just getting up there and jumping around or whatever.
I've heard a lot of people say that, and I definitely disagree with that. I think music theory helps out a lot.
Yeah, it really
Yeah.
does.
All right, that's gonna wrap it up. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.